All right, strap in, everyone, because today we are going deep on Mark Manson's Everything is Fact.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, you guys sent in some seriously thought-provoking excerpts.
Yeah.
And his take on hope
Mm-hmm.
and what it means to be human is, well, let's just say, he doesn't really sugarcoat anything.
Yeah, he does not. He's definitely a straight shooter. And I think that's one of the things that's so refreshing about Manson is just that he tackles these
Yeah.
big, like, philosophical questions head on, but he does it with this, like, healthy dose of humor and straight talk. You know, kind of like that friend who tells you the truth,
Yeah.
even when you don't want to hear it, you know?
Yeah, totally. And one of the first, like, truth bombs he drops is this whole concept of the uncomfortable truth, right?
Right.
This idea that maybe, just maybe, there's no, like, inherent meaning to our existence.
Whoa, deep.
Which, I mean, it kind of makes you wonder, right? If we're not here for some grand cosmic purpose, then what are we here for?
Right, right.
What gives our lives meaning then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Manson argues that a lot of us, like, we avoid confronting this uncomfortable truth
Right.
by creating meaning where there might not be any. Like, we project significance onto the world.
Okay.
You know, we cling to beliefs and all sorts of things to avoid feeling insignificant
Right.
in the face of, well, you know, just the vastness of it all.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I can see how that, like, that could be comforting in a way, to feel like there's some kind of order or purpose to it all.
Right.
But is that, like, a sustainable way to live?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what happens when those beliefs get challenged?
Right, right.
Or when life throws you a curveball that just, like, doesn't fit into your neat little narrative? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What happens then?
Well, that's where Manson gets into this fascinating interplay
Okay.
between what he calls the feeling brain and the thinking brain.
Okay, yeah.
And he uses this analogy of the consciousness car. And so in this analogy, the feeling brain is this kind of impulsive driver, right? Who's focused on instant gratification and pleasure and avoiding pain.
Okay.
While the thinking brain is like the more rational passenger,
Yeah.
who's trying to kind of navigate towards long-term goals
Okay.
and make rational decisions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, think about it. Like, how often does your feeling brain
Oh my God.
hijack your decisions?
All the time.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
literally, when I hit the snooze button,
Yeah.
instead of getting up for my morning run,
Right.
or when I, like, tell myself that I deserve that extra slice of pizza,
Or exactly.
even though I know I'm going to regret it later.
Yes, or like scrolling through social media for hours when you have a million other things you should be doing.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, too.
Right. But it feels good in the moment. And Manson argues that this constant battle between like our impulses and our rational minds plays out in so many aspects of our lives. And he gives some really like striking examples too to illustrate this point. Like one of the ones that he talks about is the allure of cults,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And think about it. The promise of belonging, the certainty, a clear sense of purpose,
Right.
that can be incredibly seductive, especially, if your thinking brain is exhausted
Yeah.
from trying to make sense of a world that often feels very chaotic and meaningless.
Right. So you're kind of silencing that thinking brain by latching onto something that just gives you all the answers.
Exactly.
Even if it doesn't necessarily make sense.
It's like a shortcut to meaning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it often comes at a pretty high cost, like at the cost of your individual autonomy
Right.
and critical thinking. It's like silencing that nagging voice in your head that's like, wait a minute, this doesn't quite add up.
This doesn't feel right.
Exactly, yeah.
But you kind of push it down.
You push it down, you're like, I don't want to think about that too hard.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
I just want the easy answer. And that's just one example. Manson also talks about like this constant desire to change ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Like this endless pursuit of self-improvement
Yeah.
as another way that we try to like fill the void of meaning.
Okay.
Like we're always chasing this like elusive, better version of ourselves, hoping that once we achieve it, we'll finally feel complete and worthy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like we're all like running on this hamster wheel of self-optimization, just like constantly trying to be better, do better, be more productive.
It's fueled by that feeling brain. That feeling brain is insatiable.
Yeah. And always wants more.
Always wants more.
Yeah.
Always wants better.
But I'm starting to see how this all like ties back to that uncomfortable truth, right? If we can't find inherent meaning in the world around us,
Right.
we try to manufacture it by like constantly striving and achieving and becoming.
Exactly. And then we come to, Newton's laws of emotion, which is his way of explaining how our values are formed
Yeah.
and how they influence literally everything we do.
Okay.
So his first law states that, every action demands an equal and opposite emotional reaction.
Oh, wow.
Right. So every experience, every interaction, every choice that we make triggers an emotional response in us that shapes our values.
Okay. I think I'm following you, but give me an example. How does this, actually play out in real life?
Okay, sure. Think about something simple, like forgetting a friend's birthday.
Oh, no.
Okay, so the action of forgetting,
Yeah.
right, that triggers an emotional response, both in you and in your friend.
Right, yeah.
So you might feel guilty or ashamed.
Totally.
Your friend might feel hurt or disappointed.
Yeah.
And then these emotions influence how much you value the friendship.
Right.
If it happens repeatedly, you might start questioning the friendship altogether.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
No, it's like a constant feedback loop
between
our actions, our emotions, and our values. And it's not just birthdays. This applies to everything, right? Yeah. Relationships, politics, even how we feel about our favorite sports teams, everything.
It's like how much we care about something is directly related to how it makes us feel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely. And then we get to his second law.
Okay.
Which gets a little more complex.
Right.
But basically, it states that how we value everything in life relative to ourselves is the sum of our emotions over time.
Oh, wow. That's deep.
Right. Basically, what this means is that we have this kind of internal scoreboard, right, where we're constantly comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
And if we feel like we're consistently on the losing end of this comparison, it can lead to shame and low self-worth.
Yeah.
So it's not just about individual experiences, but it's about the cumulative effect of those experiences over time. It's like, this moral gap that we're always trying to close.
Yeah.
But the goalposts keep moving.
Yeah. They do. No wonder so many of us feel inadequate or like we're not good enough.
Right.
Yeah. But if our values are so deeply intertwined with our emotions and experiences, then how much control do we actually have over them? Can we actually change our values, or are we just kind of stuck with whatever programming we've picked up along the way?
Right. Well, that's where things get really interesting, because Manson argues that our feeling brain, right, that impulsive driver, creates this hierarchy of values for us. It prioritizes certain experiences over others and shapes our identities. But he also suggests that these values can change, sometimes without us even realizing it. And he tells this great story.
I love his stories.
About his friend who went from being like a total party animal to a career-driven professional.
Right.
And, her priorities shifted. And with those shifting priorities, her sense of fun and purpose also shifted.
Wow.
So what used to be really exciting and fulfilling to her, like late nights and social gatherings, became less so as her values changed.
Right. So it's not necessarily about forcing ourselves to change our values, but more about understanding that they can evolve as we grow.
Exactly.
And as our priorities shift. Okay, that's interesting. But how does this all tie back to the idea of hope, though?
Right. Well, Manson has a pretty unconventional view of hope, right? Yeah. He defines religion in a very broad sense as like any system of beliefs and values that provides hope and meaning.
Yeah.
So, this could include traditional religions, but also ideologies like capitalism or feminism, or even like our personal relationships. Like, in a sense, we all kind of subscribe to some form of religion,
Right.
That gives us a framework for understanding the world and our place in it.
Okay, yeah. So we're all seeking that sense of meaning and purpose, whether we find it in a higher power or a political movement, or simply the hope for a loving family. But what's Manson's issue with hope then, It seems like a pretty universal human desire. Why does he see it as potentially destructive?
That is a great question, and that's what we're going to unpack in part 2 of this deep dive.
Ooh, cliffhanger.
We're going to explore the darker side of hope, the ways in which it can trap us in these cycles of delusion and disappointment. So get ready.
Oh, I am ready. Let's do it.
It's going to be good.
Okay, so last time we were talking about how we all crave meaning and purpose,
Right.
and how this often leads us to cling to various religions,
Mm.
whether it's a specific belief system or even just like the hope for a better future.
Right, exactly. Any system that provides us with that sense of hope and meaning.
Exactly. But you were saying that like Manson actually sees hope as potentially destructive.
Yeah, he does. He makes this argument that while hope can be a really powerful motivator,
Mm.
it can also kind of blind us to reality.
Yeah.
Like it often involves rejecting the present moment, focusing on what could be rather than what is.
Okay, yeah. I've definitely experienced that. Like that feeling of future tripping where you're so focused on achieving some goal or like reaching some milestone that you totally miss out on the beauty of what's happening right now.
Yeah, exactly. And Manson takes it a step further and argues that hope, often, it can actually fuel conflict and division.
Okay, how?
Well, when we become so attached to a particular vision of the future, we tend to like demonize anyone who doesn't share that vision.
Oh, okay. This reminds me of how polarized like our political discourse has become. It's like everyone is so convinced that their side has the answer, like their side has the solution to all the problems,
Right.
that there's no room for compromise or even just like civil discussion.
Right. It's a classic example of how hope, when it becomes dogma, can actually be a barrier to progress.
Wow.
And it's not just limited to politics either. Manson argues that this dynamic plays out in all sorts of areas.
Hmm.
Religion, relationships, even just our personal goals and aspirations. We get so fixated on this like specific outcome that we lose sight of the bigger picture, the interconnectedness of things.
So, if clinging to hope can be so detrimental, what's the alternative? Is Manson suggesting that we just give up on hope altogether and just like resign ourselves to this bleak, meaningless existence? Because that doesn't sound very appealing.
No, not exactly. He's not advocating for like nihilism or despair or anything like that. He's proposing kind of a more nuanced approach to hope,
Hmm.
one that acknowledges its limitations and its potential pitfalls. He even suggests that a life without hope might actually be a path to greater freedom and acceptance.
Wait, hold on. A life without hope? How is that even possible?
Yeah, it's a radical idea.
Doesn't that just lead to apathy and inaction?
It's not about giving up on striving for a better world or resigning yourself to misery. It's about finding meaning and purpose in the present moment, in simply being better
Yeah.
rather than hoping for a better life.
Okay.
And he actually connects this idea to his formula of humanity, which is based on Immanuel Kant's philosophy.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Remind me, what was that formula all about?
Yeah, so it's about recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every human being,
Okay.
right? Treating others as ends in themselves rather than a means to an end.
Okay.
It's about acting with consciousness and intention, making choices that are aligned with our values rather than simply reacting to our impulses and desires.
So, like, living a more ethical and compassionate life, recognizing the interconnectedness of all things. But how does this relate to, like, living without hope?
Well, Manson's argument is that when we're constantly fixated on the future, on what could be, we lose sight of the present moment.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
people around us, the opportunity to actually make a difference right now. Right.
So it's about, like, shifting our focus from the outcome to the process, from the destination to the journey.
Exactly. He's suggesting that true fulfillment, it doesn't come from achieving some distant goal, but rather from, living in alignment with our values, from cultivating meaningful connections,
Right.
making conscious choices that actually contribute to the well-being of ourselves and others.
But if we're not striving for, like, some future utopia, how do we deal with the pain and suffering that's so prevalent in the world right now? Like, Manson seems to really embrace pain as an inevitable part of the human experience. Why is that?
Well, he dedicates a whole chapter to exploring the nature of pain. And he argues that pain is, it's universal, it's unavoidable.
Okay.
And he introduces this concept called the blue dot effect,
Okay.
which suggests that our perception of pain actually adapts over time. No matter how much progress we make, no matter how good things get, there's always this little like blue dot of dissatisfaction that kind of lingers.
So even as our lives improve materially, emotionally, whatever, we're still kind of wired for a certain level of discontent.
Yeah.
That's kind of depressing.
Well, that's the trap of the modern pursuit of happiness, according to Manson.
Mm-hmm.
He's arguing that this constant striving for happiness, for a pain-free existence, it actually sets us up for disillusionment and despair.
Oh, wow. Because the reality is that pain is just an intrinsic part of life, and by trying to eliminate it, we're actually denying our own humanity.
Exactly. And this ties back to his critique of the internet and social media.
Okay.
He argues that the internet, which was initially intended to be this liberating force, it's actually become this massive machine for manufacturing fake freedom.
Okay, what do you mean?
It bombards us with distractions and instant gratification. It gives us this illusion of choice and control.
Right.
And it's all kind of in this attempt to help us avoid pain and discomfort.
Yeah. And it's incredibly addictive. Like, we get sucked into this vortex of endless scrolling and clicking and consuming.
Right. Always seeking that next hit of dopamine, but it never quite satisfies.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so where does this real freedom that you mentioned earlier come in?
Right. So Manson's concept of real freedom, it's not about avoiding pain or chasing fleeting pleasure. It's about accepting the world unconditionally, acknowledging the inevitability of pain, and mastering our desires rather than being ruled by them.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. It's about developing a more resilient and adaptable mindset, one that can kind of weather the storms of life without falling apart. But how do we actually cultivate that kind of real freedom? Like, that sounds pretty abstract and challenging.
Well, Manson suggests that it starts with, recognizing the limitations of our feeling brain,
Okay, yeah.
that impulsive driver that's constantly seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And he's not saying that we should suppress our emotions or deny our feelings or anything like that. It's more about becoming aware of how those feelings are driving our actions and learning to make more conscious choices.
So, becoming a more mindful and intentional driver of our own consciousness car.
Exactly. And this is where practices like meditation can be really helpful.
Right.
Manson describes meditation as a practice of kind of anti-fragility,
Okay.
like training our minds to actually withstand the ebb and flow of pain and discomfort without getting completely lost in the story of the self.
Okay, but full disclosure, meditation is not exactly my forte. I tend to get fidgety after 5 minutes. Are there other ways to cultivate this, like mental resilience?
Oh, absolutely. Manson acknowledges that meditation can be really challenging, but he does emphasize its importance in kind of developing that mental discipline we need to navigate a world that's just filled with distractions and temptations.
Okay, so it's not about achieving some blissful state of enlightenment. It's more about just building the muscle of self-awareness.
Exactly. Recognizing that our minds are constantly generating thoughts and feelings, many of which are unhelpful or even destructive.
Yeah, yeah. And we don't have to believe everything we think.
That's a crucial distinction, yeah.
This makes me think about how we often get caught up in the stories we tell ourselves about our own lives.
Right.
Remember how Manson was talking about our values becoming intertwined with these stories and making us so fiercely protective of them?
Yeah. He's suggesting that our identities are essentially narratives that we've constructed based on our experiences and the values that we've adopted.
Yeah.
And these narratives can become so ingrained that we resist any information that challenges them.
Right.
And this is where the danger of ideology comes in.
Okay.
Manson argues that ideologies, whether they're political or religious, can become rigid belief systems that just blind us to alternative perspectives.
Because we become so invested in the rightness of our own beliefs that we demonize anyone who disagrees with us.
Exactly. He points out how this plays out in everything, from political debates to arguments about sports teams.
Oh my God, yeah.
We create these us versus them narratives that just fuel conflict and division.
Right, right. Okay. But if we can develop the self-awareness to recognize these patterns, to question our own beliefs and be open to other perspectives, maybe we can kind of break free from this cycle of, ideological warfare.
It's about recognizing that our values, our beliefs, they're not these absolute truths. They're interpretations of the world shaped by our experiences, by our own biases.
Okay, I see. I'm seeing a pattern here. Manson seems to be advocating for a much more nuanced and compassionate approach to life in general, whether it's hope or pain or our belief systems. He's encouraging us to embrace complexity.
Yeah.
Question our assumptions.
Exactly.
Be open to different perspectives.
You're catching on. And this leads us to another really crucial aspect of Manson's argument, the future of humanity in the age of artificial intelligence. Buckle up, because this is where things get really interesting and maybe a little unsettling.
All right, bring it on. I'm ready for the next mind-blowing revelation. Let's jump into the world of AI. Okay, so we've talked about the potential downsides of clinging to hope, the fact that pain is just part of life, and how getting stuck in rigid belief systems can really hold us back. Now, let's jump into AI. What does Manson have to say about the future of humanity in the age of artificial intelligence?
Well, he paints a pretty wild picture of what that future could look like, and he doesn't sugarcoat it. He suggests AI could either end up upgrading our brains, eliminating our need for things like strife and suffering, or it could actually create artificial strife to keep us entertained and maybe even controlled.
So in one scenario, we become these like perfectly content beings plugged into a virtual utopia, free from pain but maybe lacking any real agency.
Right.
And in the other scenario, we're essentially like pawns in some highly sophisticated game manipulated by these AI overlords.
Exactly. It's like choose your own dystopia,
Yeah.
right?
It's a fascinating, if a little bit unsettling, idea. And it raises some pretty big questions, too, about consciousness, free will, and what it even means to be human.
Totally. Like, is it even possible to eliminate pain and suffering without also losing our autonomy, our ability to grow and learn?
It's almost like he's saying our relationship with pain, our ability to struggle and strive, is actually essential to what makes us human.
Right.
Like, without those challenges, without the kind of friction of reality, we become something less.
Exactly. And this ties back to his point about the destructive nature of hope. If we're constantly focused on a pain-free future orchestrated by technology, do we risk losing the very things that make us unique?
Yeah.
The things that drive us to create and evolve?
Right.
Do we just become like complacent consumers instead of actively shaping our own destiny?
So maybe the answer isn't about eliminating pain or casing this idea of everlasting hope, but finding a way to live in the tension between those two things. To just embrace this messy, unpredictable reality of being human, with all of its ups and downs, joys and sorrows.
Right. And finding meaning and purpose, not in some external source, but in how we choose to navigate those challenges, the opportunities life throws our way. Remember how Manson said everything's fucked?
Yeah.
Well, he also said that everything being fucked doesn't require hope. Hope requires everything being fucked.
That's a pretty mind-bending statement. What's he getting at with that?
Well, he's saying it's our perception of the world as flawed, as imperfect, that actually drives our need for hope.
Hmm.
So if we could just accept the world as it is, with all of its flaws, maybe our reliance on hope would lessen, and we could find a different kind of meaning, one that's rooted in acceptance of being present, rather than always chasing some elusive future state.
It's a radical idea. It really challenges how we think about the world and our place in it. Is it possible to find peace, to feel fulfilled, without believing that things will always get better, that our pain will eventually go away, that maybe, just maybe, things are okay as they are right now?
That's a great question, and it's one that Manson really digs into throughout the book. He seems to suggest the answer isn't about finding all the right answers, but asking the right questions.
Right.
And learning to live with that uncertainty, the ambiguity that comes with those questions.
It's like he's saying, hey, life is messy and complicated, there's no magic formula for happiness, but that doesn't mean it's not worth living. Actually, maybe it's in that messiness and the struggle that we find the greatest opportunities for growth and meaning.
Absolutely. And that message is so relevant today, especially in a world that can feel pretty overwhelming and confusing. Manson's encouraging us to embrace those uncomfortable truths, to find the humor in it all, to just accept the complexity of the human experience. It's not about finding easy solutions, but developing the resilience and wisdom to navigate the ups and downs.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. Manson really takes us on a wild ride, challenging what we think about hope, about pain, the stories we tell ourselves.
And he leaves us with more questions than answers, which is probably the point. It's about sparking deeper introspection, a more nuanced understanding of ourselves and the world.
So, as we wrap up our exploration of Mark Manson's Everything is Fcked, what final thought can we leave our listeners with today?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. The world is a messy, complicated place. But that doesn't mean it's devoid of meaning or beauty. The real challenge and the opportunity is learning to navigate the complexities with courage, with honesty and compassion. And hey, a little humor doesn't hurt either. So embrace the uncertainty, the struggle, the growth. Connect with others, even those you disagree with. And remember, the journey is the destination.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We encourage all of you listening to keep pondering these ideas, to explore your own relationship with hope, with pain, and with the stories you tell yourself about the world. And if you want a thought-provoking and often pretty funny guide on that journey, definitely check out Mark Manson's Everything is Fcked. Until next time, happy pondering, everyone.